Hello everyone, and welcome to Taste of Milwaukee. Today we take a look at Milwaukee's favorite icy treat, frozen custard. We'll go behind the scenes of some of Milwaukee's most iconic custard stands and meet a newly married couple who put the dessert front and center at their wedding. All of that and more coming up today on Taste of Milwaukee. Hi, and welcome to Taste of Milwaukee. I'm your host, Emily Rackovan. Milwaukee has long been known as the frozen custard capital of the world. But how did the frozen treat come to be the city's most famous dessert, and just what separates it from ice cream? Here to shed some light on this mystery are Bobby Tanzillo and Kathleen McCann, authors of American palette book, Milwaukee Frozen Custard. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. So for the uninitiated, what is frozen custard?
Well, frozen custard is a type of ice cream, but it's a type of ice cream that has egg yolks in it.
Okay.
So it has a minimum egg yolk solid content to it, and it also has less. There's something called overrun, which is the amount of air that's mixed into ice cream, and frozen custard has less than traditional ice cream, so it's denser and creamier.
Gotcha. So ice cream came first before custard?
Yeah, and all custard is ice cream, but not all ice cream is custard.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. And why do you think that frozen custard has lasted so long and stayed so popular in Milwaukee?
Well, frozen custard came to Milwaukee, after it started on the East Coast and kind of made its way westward, if you would.
Okay.
It went to Lafayette, Indiana first. It was in Chicago first, and it was in St. Louis first. And the Chicago World's Fair is probably the connection and how it came to Milwaukee, because a Wisconsin company supplied all of the custard mix that you might see them pouring the big, now you see it in big bags, pouring it into the custard machines.
Sure.
And that is how the connection came to Milwaukee. And then in 1935, Clark's, the first frozen custard stand, opened here.
Very cool. Awesome. So of anything you could have done, why a book on frozen custard?
Well, everybody in Milwaukee loves frozen custard, right?
Yeah,
and nobody
true.
had really done it before, so we thought
Okay.
there was definitely room for somebody to look into the history and why it's such an important thing in Milwaukee.
And how long did it take you to write this book?
I would say about 2.5 years.
Okay. Wow. It's a lot of custard.
It is a lot of custard. There's a lot of research to be
Yeah,
done.
absolutely. Do you think that the growth of frozen custard has had an effect on the growth of this city?
I don't know if it has had an effect on the growth, but it's certainly kind of grown up with the city, if you will.
Sure.
The custard stands became really popular at the same time that drive-ins in general became really popular in the 40s and 50s. And that's also when the sort of teenager culture started really taking
Sure.
off. That's all these, baby boomer kids.
Okay.
And so there was a time when, if you look back in the old phone books and the different ways that we were researching custard stands that are now closed, you couldn't, there was custard stands opening across the street from other custard stands. There were so many of them, and it seemed like the appetite was insatiable. People could not get enough frozen custard. And now obviously a lot of those haven't lasted, but certainly a lot of them have, and that's why we are the frozen custard capital of the world.
Sure.
Undoubtedly we have the most.
Okay, very cool. And how many samples did it take to get you through this book?
Oh my. I don't know.
few.
Quite a few.
Quite
Yeah,
a
we
few.
went to a lot of the places we wrote about, if not all of them, close to
Okay.
all of them. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of spanning over 2.5 years. That's quite a bit of
Yeah.
custard. That's so cool.
Tough job, but somebody had to do it.
Oh, I know, yeah. So everyone in Milwaukee seems to have great memories revolving around frozen custard. Do you guys have any stories like from your childhood or kind of when you first discovered frozen custard that really stand out in your brain?
I didn't grow up here, but I do remember
Okay.
coming to visit here and going to the original Cops on 76th, not the original Cops, but the earlier building that they had on 76th in Layton,
Okay.
which was a sort of unique structure.
Yeah.
And I remember going there and just it being unlike anything I'd ever seen before.
That's awesome. And about you?
My first custard was probably Cops, also on 76th, or maybe Allianz. I was a South Side person.
Sure.
But I also grew up really close to an A&W and a Dairy Queen, and
Okay.
also a Boy Blue, which was another small chain. I like all frozen desserts. So.
Sure. Would you say that custard is your favorite frozen dessert?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay, very cool. So now that we've kind of seen it become a little bit more commercialized, so we see like Culver's has it and they're kind of more of a chain. How did that happen, or how did it kind of spread?
Well, Culver's is great because it's a Wisconsin-born company, and what's great about it is that they use all Wisconsin dairy and all of Wisconsin beef at every location around the country. So wherever you go, you're actually eating sort of a taste of Wisconsin, quite literally there.
Okay.
And their growth has been insane. They've got well over 600 locations now. There are some other chains out there that don't really have Wisconsin ties, but they're not nearly as big as Culver's. So Culver's really is the one that's taken it all around the country.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So would you say, did you try it in other states, or custard in other states aside from Milwaukee, or cities aside from Milwaukee?
Yeah, we did.
Whenever we travel, we always have to stop for frozen custard.
And would you say that Milwaukee does have the best frozen custard?
Of course.
Oh,
Of
yeah.
course.
No, really, truly, the quality in Milwaukee is what brought it to kind of fame, if you will, and that keeping a high quality standard among all the stands. There's a lot of stories that they'll tell you about how Leon's helped a lot of people get into the business and really helped each other along. Not only were they small businesses, but also trying to keep the quality of the custard high, because as he said at the time, if someone goes to a custard stand that's not in line but has a bad experience, they're going to think that's frozen custard.
Yeah.
So they all wanted to make it really good.
Very cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Really interesting stuff, guys. We'll talk to you more in just a little bit. As our guests mentioned, Milwaukee is home to more restaurants that serve frozen custard than perhaps any other city in the country, and more are popping up almost overnight. We recently went out to Milwaukee's oldest operating custard stand and found out that sometimes nothing beats the classics.
A bulk of the population thinks it's Gillies. People call in betting on lunch. I'll buy lunch, I bet you it's Gillies, and it's not, and they buy a lot of lunches. But Paul Gillis is why it's Gillis's. All the seasoned people, the old timers, they know Paul Gillis, it was Gillis's. And the staff and everybody knew, patrons, it was like Paul Gillis, so you don't call it Paul Gillies, because that was kind of like butchering his name. But me, when I call places, we're calling for service, materials, parts, whatever it is, and we'll say, I'm Tom from Gillis's, and they'll say, who? From Gillies. Oh, Gillies. As long as you know where it is and you want to come here and eat and grab a shake Sunday, malt or something, call it what you need to.
Linscott knows just how important the community is to his business.
It's humbling that the community embraces us to the level they do. My son's the third generation of our family running it, and there's at least 4 generations of customers coming here. So I would like to think we've provided, and we're pretty connected to giving back to the community and all the local things that go on around here. So it's a mutually important relationship.
With a location central to many Milwaukee attractions, Gillis's has been a family stop for generations.
We rely pretty heavily, being located so close to the schools and the stadium. We have a lot of people utilizing it for a pit stop before and after games or events, and treat central location. It works out pretty well.
Linscott hopes that his son can help grow Gillis's to the next level.
We're never done. There's a lot of opportunity. We're working on growing the catering, for off-site events and work picnics and business organization, employee meetings, things of that sort. Weddings have gotten more popular because people want something more unique instead of just a cake. We've set up Sunday bars and novelty items. So we've had a lot of fortune in that area. And we've had the off-site events like Irish Fest with the Jameson custard, and so just it gives us an opportunity to do some other fun stuff and gets the staff off of this floor and into other locations. You know, we have the Toast It Tonight events that we do work with down there to help the band shell and the cost of that. So it's a lot of opportunity. So where it could go, I have no idea. I'm glad my son's got the energy to propel this thing to the next level, whatever that may come to be.
It's so cool to have such a landmark in our own backyard. Bobby, Kathleen, in your research, how important is Gillis's to the area around it?
Well, Gillis is important to Custard history in general, being the oldest continuously operating. Now, it wasn't the first, but the fellow who started Gillis, Paul Gillis, worked right down the street about 10 blocks away at the first custard stand, Clark's, and then he opened his own. But right around it, there were a lot of high schools, so we have these great pictures in our book about all the teenagers on a Friday, Saturday night during the football games. They'd come from all the high schools right around there, like Tosa East and Pius and Juneau High School. And the parking lot is literally packed. I mean, it's a different building. They've had a couple different iterations of their building. But they used to have a manager would go around. In fact, Tom Linscott's dad was a manager there before he bought it. And they'd go around and tell people, oh, you're done with your custard, get going. Like they'd shoo them out of there so they could fit more people into the parking lot.
Wow, that's crazy. And how much has Leon's iconic look helped its longevity?
Oh, I think that's a big factor. I think people really love to go. I mean, Cops doesn't have that look anymore, and people still love to go there. But I think like Leon's and Kit's and those places that have that real 40s and 50s vibe really get people excited to go there. It feels like an experience. There's the custard, which is great, but also just the whole feeling of almost stepping back in time, right?
Sure, that's awesome. And much like Gillis's, Leon's keeps its menu simple. What is your go-to order?
Oh, at Leon's?
Yes. Yeah.
Custard.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't usually get food there. I get custard,
Okay.
and Ron Schneider, who owns it, is very particular about what he makes in the stand food-wise because he's concerned about those flavors sort of infiltrating the custard.
Okay.
So that's why he has no onions there
Sure.
for that reason. That's also why he has a very limited menu because he really wants to focus on the custard. So as a customer, I too focus on the custard.
And do they have different flavors of custard there?
They do. They have a few.
Okay.
They
Do you
don't-
have a favorite of the flavors?
I love chocolate. I have a.
Do you?
I'm
Okay.
a big fan of the Dusty Road Sundae,
Ooh.
which is vanilla custard, hot chocolate, and malt powder.
Oh my gosh.
But I usually sub in chocolate custard instead of the vanilla.
Wow, you really go all out on
I
that. And what about you?
At Leon's, I would probably choose either cinnamon. They have a great cinnamon flavor, or chocolate. Yeah.
Okay. Kind of keeping it simple. I like
A
that.
lot of people love the butter pecan there.
Yeah, they're known for their butter
Very
pecan.
popular.
Okay, I'll have to try that one. And as you just saw, there's a lot of history there with Gillis's. So how important is that stand to the history of Milwaukee?
It's really important. Again, it was, the oldest continuously running custard stand in Milwaukee. And the fellow that started it worked at the first custard stand. And so it is important in the fact that it is still in business. And like Tom said, they're the fourth generation only running it, his son Willie and him. I think it's just a really important piece of history.
That's so cool.
Also, Leon got his start there.
Oh, did
Leon
he?
was a manager at Gillis before he started
kind
his
of all
own
comes
stand.
full circle then.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I found really interesting about the story was how little that it's changed since it's opened. Do you kind of find some comfort when you go there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at Gillis's, especially because the manager, the owners are always there,
Sure.
which is pretty great.
That's
You
super
can
cool.
always, you can feel that sort of family touch to it.
Sure. And do you feel that Leon's has kind of taken on some of Gillis's character since the manager used to work there?
Well, Leon's is just so iconic in its own
Sure,
way too, and
sure.
again, it's a family-run stand, and the people who own it are there a lot of the time, so it's definitely feels like a small independent business that really reflects the city.
Very cool.
Leon himself helped a lot of people get into the custard business.
That's
He
awesome.
used to sell machines and make their own Leon's custard machines. And the machine is really important to the frozen custard.
That's awesome. That's such a cool place with unique history. Our next featured custard stand may not be the Milwaukee's oldest, but it may be the most iconic. Let's take a look at what makes Leon's so unique to Milwaukee.
For over 70 years, Leon's Frozen Custard has created a legacy on Milwaukee's South Side.
Well, I suppose a legacy, if you want to call it that, is one of stability and service for the neighborhood. We do what we do, which basically is frozen dessert products. But we are very consistent at it, and we've made very few changes over the years. So I think that adds a certain comfort to the surroundings. People can be comfortable with something that hasn't changed, or they can rely on it.
When asked why Leon's was so popular, Schneider was quick to point out the stand's prime location.
Being on 27th Street, which was and sort of still is US 41, any traveling between here and Chicago was US 41. And in the early days, we were on the absolute edge of town. So when you got near Milwaukee, one of the first things you saw was us.
Schneider also points to the stand's iconic look, which he says isn't changing anytime soon.
If you're in Milwaukee, there's some things you're probably going to do. Probably going to go to Mater's, for example. You're going to get some frozen custard. The building is still 1950s drive-in because when it was last remodeled, which was 1955, this is the look. And people have asked why we don't change it. Why don't we modernize it? Well, so what's a modern drive-in? McDonald's? Is that a modern drive-in? Changes every couple of years. If you took the sign off of McDonald's, you wouldn't even know what they do there. Here, with no signage, you know this is a drive-in. And you know at a drive-in, you can get certain things. Ice cream, frozen custard product, sandwich, a malt.
People in the city are dedicated to Leon's, even in Milwaukee's cold winters.
Consistency and reliability is very important. Plus, even on the worst days of weather, we're going to be here. There are people who have to be out, even in the bad weather.
So what's next for Leon's? According to Schneider, it's more of the same.
We've just been content with frozen custard. It's easier in a way, and then in other ways it's not. But we can devote our time to the product, because if you ignore the product, you don't have a good product anymore. So our focus is the frozen custard. That's what we do. I think if we stay the course and do what we've always done, we'll be okay. And my father used to say, the only people who failed in the business were the ones who didn't want to do the work. I'd like to think our fate or our future is in our hands, and I would hope that my son, who's very involved in the business, has indicated he'd like to continue to do this. And if he does it, it'll be fine. I won't have to worry about it. I'm not quite ready yet to step aside. One of these days I will, but I've been doing this a long time. Most people don't do anything as long as I've done this work here.
It's great to see a different side of these Milwaukee landmarks that we see almost every day. Speaking of, our next guests put frozen custard at the forefront of their big day. But as Melissa and Luke will tell you, it wasn't an easy decision as to where to get the custard from. Luke and Melissa, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely, thank you.
So why custard instead of the traditional cake?
Yeah, I just don't think either of us were necessarily big fans of cake, and doing custard was something unique and something special to us that fit us a little bit better. And
yeah, while we were dating, we found ourselves getting custard at least once or twice a week.
Okay.
So it kind of made sense when we were thinking of something to share with our friends and family, that it'd be something that both of us really loved.
That's awesome. That's super unique. I really like that. So I understand that you guys did have a bit of trouble deciding what kind of custard or where to get it from. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I very much prefer Leon's custard, but Luke is a Cops guy.
Okay.
So I, being the loving almost wife I am, decided that we could go Cops for
Okay.
the wedding custard. So he won that one.
Well,
Yeah.
the only one.
Yeah,
Do you
take it
still
where you
feel
can get
pretty?
it.
Yeah, right. Do you still feel pretty? Do you feel pretty good about that decision?
It's a good
Did it
choice.
turn out well?
I think so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good service, and yeah, it all worked out. Worked out
Good.
well.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So, how long did it take to plan the whole custard bar, and what was kind of the process of that?
I don't know, it was probably a couple months before the wedding, where we actually went to Cops to eat or whatever, and just talked to the manager there about kind of a bulk custard order and what that took, and probably with a couple weeks after that ordered, or probably a couple weeks before the wedding, we probably ordered it and got it, scooped it all out into dishes, and her grandma was working on the toppings bar for a while. But.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that we actually have some pictures from your wedding. Oh, yep, there they are. So, of all of the toppings, what were some of the most popular choices?
That's a tricky one. We had, like Luke said, my grandma put together the toppings bar, and we had everything from sauces to candies to cookies,
Wow.
nuts and chocolate sprinkles. So
it's hard to kind of narrow that down. There's so many
Absolutely.
choices. And were people surprised by the custard bar? It's not exactly what you expect going to a wedding. So were people kind of interested
Yeah, I
in
think it was a
that?
pleasant surprise for them, and I think everyone received it pretty well and were excited when they, found out about it, especially with all the kind of extras that went with it.
Right.
so.
I mean, you can't really be upset about that. So what advice would you give to someone who is looking to do this or a similar thing at their wedding?
I say go for it. If it's something that you really love and it's something that you can have fun with. We did ours in little single serve cups, so there was very little that we had to do the day of the wedding, and everybody really enjoyed it. And also buy extra, because we were eating custard for a couple weeks after the wedding.
Imagine that. Oh my gosh.
And we didn't mind one bit.
Yeah, that's not a hard ask. So finally, Melissa and Luke, I can see that you guys are expecting. Are you planning on naming him Leon?
Well, I mean, absolutely, but unfortunately, it's a girl.
Oh,
So
okay. Well, that's
she will not be named
Liana or
Leon.
something like that.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, that's super exciting. Well, it's super great to have you guys here. Do you have any other things that you would want to say about custard? Or kind of like any childhood memories that you have that really made you fall in love with custard?
Just growing up in Milwaukee, I mean, custard was always a thing that you went to, summer or even in the winter with Leon's being open every day. And just, enjoying that experience and sharing that with our family and friends was wonderful.
That's super, super cool. I really like that. And so I know that you guys have difference of opinions in custard. How do you do that when you just want to go get just a bite to eat? How do you make that decision?
Yeah, maybe it depends what else we have to do. If there's an excuse, you had an errand near
What side of
near
town we have
Cops
to
or
be
whatever,
on.
But, yeah.
Lately, I've been winning.
Yeah, well, I think that's fair. And did you grow up going to a specific custard place, or did your taste kind of just develop from trying new things?
I grew up in St. Louis.
Okay.
So Ted Drew's is kind of like the iconic custard place in St. Louis. But then coming to Milwaukee as a kid too, grandparents lived in Greenfield, so I went to
Okay.
Cops on 76th and Layton a lot. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just live right in the middle, so
Okay.
either one.
Okay, cool. So since you have had custard in St. Louis as well as Milwaukee, Milwaukee's better,
Oh,
right?
of course.
Yeah, of course. When you came to Milwaukee, were you kind of pleasantly surprised by how many custard places we have?
I've been coming here since I was a kid, so kind of knew about it, and it wasn't.
We're
Kinda
excited to check them
expected.
out again.
Yeah.
Good. Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank
Yeah.
you guys so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So that's about all the time that we have for today's Taste of Milwaukee. We want to thank everyone at Gillis's, Leon's, and Cops, as well as all of our guests for taking time to chat with us today. For Taste of Milwaukee, I'm Emily Rackovan.